If you're in the United Kingdom and you buy things with a credit card, you've probably heard of the Consumer Credit Act 1974, and specifically Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act 1974, which means that if you buy something on a credit card which is valued between £100 and £30,000 at the price point, not the amount you spend on the card, just the purchase price, then you're protected. Except for when I outline in this video, you're protected under Section 75 of this Act. So what does that mean? Well, ordinarily, if you buy something from a company and it goes wrong, you can sue the company for it going wrong because of all of the either agreed, contractual, written or express or implied terms, or terms implied by the law. For example, the Consumer Rights Act 2015. However, if you've bought it and paid for some of it on a credit card, or the finance is directly linked to the product, for example, car financing and things like that. As a caveat with the vehicle finance, I'm not talking about hire purchase because that is slightly different, because with hire purchase, you are hiring it from a finance company who has purchased it from the dealer, and then ultimately you've got the option to buy it at the end. I've dealt with that in another video, and I'll come back to deal with that in more detail in yet another video. If you've used credit, you are protected, except where I set out, by Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act. That means you have a like claim against the finance provider. So if you spend even just a few pounds on your credit card and the purchase is, say, £300, you can claim both against the trader and against the finance provider, the credit card company. However, this is not a blanket rule, and there are some exceptions. The first I've already mentioned, which is the item needs to be between £100 and £30,000. So a penny more or a penny less, and you can't be protected by this section. However, you might be able to use one of the bank's own systems called a chargeback, and that might be separately available to you for smaller amounts, and they might well help you that way. However, if it's between £100 and £30,000, you can ordinarily use Section 75, save where, if you're buying something from a third-party seller, think Amazon Marketplace. So you might be on Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, and if you buy something that is not sold by Amazon themselves, and it's by a third-party seller listing something on the Amazon.co.uk website, that is a third-party seller transaction, meaning you are paying Amazon, Amazon's paying the seller is then sending you the product, and whilst Amazon does have its own A to Z guarantee, within 90 days you can make a claim and they will try to resolve this dispute with the seller. You cannot use Section 75 to make a claim against the seller because it's on the marketplace. Similarly, things like eBay and things like that, unless you are directly paying the seller outside of the eBay platform, which I think is against their rules anyway. I haven't used it for a long time, so I wouldn't know. But just bear in mind that you can't use it in third-party seller transactions like that. You also can't use it in these buy now, pay later schemes whereby some of these are set up by 3 or 4 payments and things like that, whereby you owe them the money over a set period of time and they are paying the retailer the money. Because there's an intermediary involved, and that's the real key here, there's an intermediary involved, you can't use Section 75 to sue the finance provider. Because just because you're making payments doesn't necessarily mean you can use that if there's an intermediary involved, such as a buy now, pay later scheme. Similarly, if you've withdrawn cash from your credit card, you've gone to an ATM and used that money physically to pay for a product, again, you can't use Section 75 because there's no direct link between the financial transaction and the purchase of the product. It is not an intrinsic link between the two. And finally, you cannot use Section 75 for a debit card because the clue is in the name. It's a debit card. They are debiting your account. It is not a credit transaction. It's not a provision of credit for that transaction. Therefore, you cannot use Section 75 for a debit card transaction, only for a credit card transaction, as I've set out. You may still be able to use a chargeback with a debit card, but again, that is a system between banks. It is not legally enshrined. It is just something that they do discuss between banks to resolve these kind of disputes. If you found that useful, please do bump the like button and subscribe to my newly growing channel here. And as always, thank you for watching.